So I am Dr. Jennifer Jacobs. I'm here with my team members, my co-founder Jessica Stern, and my colleague Vicki Conger. So we're here. We're happy to talk to you afterwards, as well as anytime that's convenient for you. We have our contact information on the deck.
And you're a doctor in what?
I'm a doctor in nuclear engineering.
So a nuclear engineer. And can you just give us some more background? Where you went to school, what you were doing before this, et cetera?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm an Army veteran. My academic career, such as you would call it, started at West Point. And my background originally was in physics. And then after I spent some time on active duty, I went back and did graduate work in environmental and nuclear engineering. First environmental, then nuclear. So most of my career up until about 5 years ago was around national and homeland security, particularly around nuclear nonproliferation and counterterrorism. So you may be wondering why I'm here to talk to you today about foster care. So I promise you it makes sense. And you can go ahead and start the deck if you'd like, Mark.
Fantastic, great. I will just share it and then we'll go to, okay, perfect.
There's always the nuclear family.
That's exactly right.
That was
Yes.
the relationship. Wait, I thought you were stuck. I thought you ran out of joke credits.
That was pretty good.
I think he's got more there.
He can't stop himself.
One a month, you had like 3 in one day.
Nights of no sleep and it comes down.
Just rolls right out. So I was about 10 years ago, and you can go ahead to the next slide. About 10 years ago, I was reading an article. I was working in nuclear nonproliferation counterterrorism at the time. And this article was about foster care. And in this case, it was talking about something that was working in foster care. So in foster care, for those of you who maybe are not that familiar, you can what's called age out. So if you age out of foster care, it means you become an adult without ever having found that forever family that is promised to foster children when they're taken into government custody. If that happens to you, you leave the foster care system and you're essentially alone and on your own, and you have no supportive family to help you with that if you haven't found a family by the time you age out. It's up to you to put that together and make that happen. This can happen at age 18. It can happen in some states. You can stay up until 21, but that can be extremely challenging. So challenging, in fact, that for youth who age out in that way, by age 26, 2/3 have been homeless, they have been incarcerated, or they are dead. So that is not a good outcome. This article was talking about, and it's also quite expensive, you see there on the slide, to society. And so full disclosure, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So the return on investment that I'll be talking about later in the presentation is a return to society on whatever investment we are putting into this effort. So this is an opportunity to do something kind of on a bigger scale.
And I guess that from a legal point of view, these children are considered to be wards of the state right, until they reach an age of 18 years old, something like that.
That's correct. Yeah.
So that's why it costs $500,000.
Well, it costs $500,000. That cost comes from several studies who have estimated what does it cost for what one study calls opportunity youth to not have that opportunity realized. So if you take an 18-year-old who ages out and might go on their 18th birthday as their 18th birthday gift, they get to leave the house they've been living in and get driven to a homeless shelter. And so if that happens, the state taxpayers essentially start picking up the tab for the homeless shelter, for the fallout from being in a homeless shelter, for incarceration, for use of public benefits in terms of emergency rooms for healthcare and that kind of thing. And in particular, foster youth are notoriously undereducated. They graduate from high school at about 65% rate, as opposed to their peers who graduate upwards of 85 to 90%. And they are notoriously underemployed. So the cost to society from all of those, as well as young women who age out of foster care by age 20, over half have had an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy, a pregnancy that they're not prepared to care for the child from. So that, of course, becomes quite expensive. Yes, John.
Clarify, these people have maybe been in some foster care and then it didn't work and they go back to the orphanage, or how are they looked after when they're not infants and then they age out? Where are they?
So orphanages aren't really used anymore. The closest thing to an orphanage would be what's now called a group home. And that is sometimes used. That federal government has changed some legislation, so there's less use of group homes now and in the upcoming years. But when a youth is taken or a child is taken away from the family that they were born into, they go into foster care. So they live with a foster family, which can be anyone who has gone through the training to become a foster family, or they can go into what's often called kinship care. So living with an aunt or a grandmother or an uncle. And those can be a variety of arrangements. A child or youth can end up in a group home for various reasons. That group home is the closest thing to what you'd be thinking of as an orphanage, but they are there for a specific reason, like they have special needs or they have emotional disabilities, or they're maybe unable to operate in a traditional family home. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So if they go through that process and no one has adopted them, or they're not able to reunify with their family, then they age out. And so this article, back to the article I was talking to that caused me to leave nuclear counterterrorism and be here today to talk to you about foster care. When specialized social workers actually know how to.
Hey, Tim, can you move the cameras?
Sorry.
No worries.
Specialized social workers actually know how to find a family for any child or youth in foster care. Doesn't matter if it's an angry teenager or if it's a disabled child, what kind of problems they have. The approach that works is, instead of hoping for strangers to walk in and want to adopt an angry teenager, which can happen, but is not scalable. Instead of doing that, these specialized social workers know that the approach that works is to take that child, that teenager, and go out from that child. Find all of the connections that they've ever had to anyone who's ever been supportive or could be supportive. So relatives who don't even know they exist yet, neighbors, teachers, coaches, all of those people. And each of those people has statistically about a 0.5% chance of saying, this is the right thing for me to do and the right time for me to do it, to step up and become the permanent parent to that child. So if you can find about 200 adults who have some connection to that child, whether they knew the child already or not, we have evolved to have a clan protective based nature to our brains. That's why we're alive, because we protect our clans. So if we find that a member of our clan is in trouble, our instinct is to try to help that member of the clan. That is what our software is based on, is that evolutionary need to protect our clan. So we have essentially built a software that does this. While I was reading this article, it also triggered in my brain that the Intel community, which I'd been working with, does the exact same thing for terrorist groups. They do it with a really nice,
with a different objective.
with a very different objective, well, with a different focus, I would say. But the objective is to influence that network for a specific outcome. And certainly the outcome is different. Terrorist group, we know what we're trying to influence there. For the foster children, we're trying to build and influence a network for the better situation for that foster child. Find someone to be that child's parent, and with all of what that entails. And for a support group to come around that parent and child to support them in doing that. When Intel analysts do that, they are supported by a multi-million-dollar piece of very nice software that helps them gather data, organize that data, visualize the network, and be able to put their hands on any piece of information they need instantly. So I called up the foster organization that was highlighted in the article, and I said, this is so cool. Like, you've solved foster care. This is great. No more kids are going to be neglected. You must have some really great software, like the software I know about in the Intel community. And they said, are you kidding? They were doing this on Excel and with Microsoft Word and paper and pen. So kind of else. So I dove into that. I spent a number of years researching, met my co-founder, Jessica Stern, who herself has experienced foster care as a child. And we learned enough to know that if we wanted the software to exist, we would need to build it. So what you're looking at here is just a simple screenshot of one page of the software. The dark gray box, kind of bottom middle there, is our fictional foster child, whose name is Anna. And you can just generally see that she has some of the typical relatives you might find. Yeah, no problem. And this doesn't build itself, of course. This is the tool for the social worker to use as he or she collects information. So the typical story might go that Anna comes into foster care. Her mother, Sydney, there is in red, which is coded to mean that she's not safe or not available, but Sydney might give us some information. And as we do that, we start to pull a thread. A social worker trying to do that in a notebook or in Excel becomes quickly overwhelmed. This process, if we're going to build this out to dozens or even 100 or more relatives, you can imagine it would be overwhelming very quickly. But we can scale this process by putting it into software and making that data appear in logical places. So the social worker has built out and found a handful of relatives here. One of the most difficult pieces, it's great to know that there's an Aunt Susan. It's not very helpful if I can't contact Aunt Susan. And if Sydney has lost contact with her, then we have to find Aunt Susie's phone number. So what we've done is we've integrated, and Marty, if you'll slide it over to show the right side of the screen a little bit.
Okay.
We've integrated with a tool that we built that searches about 300 websites with publicly available data. And so on that right side panel are a handful of sites, some of our, all of our favorites, Facebook and LinkedIn and all of those. But on the top left side, you can see kind of a dark blue bubble that has our Connect Our Kids logo on it. And that is our software called People Search built into the Family Search tool. It will instantly search the internet, find any data that you can find. If you've put in Aunt Jennifer Jacobs, and all we know is she might be in Falls Church, Virginia, or that she grew up in Big Rapids, Michigan, because the internet knows. Even though I haven't lived there for 20, 25, 30 years, the internet knows. And so just with the name and maybe a city, there is a high probability that the internet will deliver to me a working phone number and email address, and maybe even a current physical.
So this goes back to what Michael Weinberg and Josh Van Dross were speaking about earlier on the panel about how all the information in the world is at your fingertips. This is an application of big data and machine learning, and they're pulling this data off of 20 data sources to get to this chart.
And then it can download
in real time.
Yep, in real time. Social workers have told us we took 7 days of work and did it in 30 seconds.
So you did this all on your own resources now?
So we did early friends and family rounds, and my husband is a tech startup guy, so he enlisted some of his friends to help get us there. But yes, so we are 5 years in. We spent the first couple years building this, raising money to get mock-ups and an early demo built, and then an early pilot. We piloted in 2020. We started with about 50 pilot users. Pandemic hit about 3 weeks into our pilot launch. And we found that instead of it shutting everything down, for us, it actually expanded everything. All of a sudden, social workers were stuck at home. They couldn't be out and about like they usually were. So instead, they found that they could do this. And they can then log their calls, they can take notes, they can produce reports on this, all kinds of things that you might expect out of technology.
So instead of like having like a yellow folder with a bunch of colored sticky notes on it, they have this.
Exactly.
Right? And again, I think the point that Jen brought up is that you really can't scale yellow binders, right? But you
can't
unless you're Mitt Romney. But you can scale a platform that has all this data on the cloud.
That's exactly right. And because it's in the cloud, social workers can do something they haven't been able to do before with that binder, is work together. So social work has enormous turnover. Some areas have up to 70% turnover in a year because this is a really hard job. And social workers are usually people who went into social work to help children and families, and instead they find that they're doing paperwork and sitting in court. This allows them to do what they wanted to do. And if they do turn over, it allows the next person to come in and pick up right where the last person left off.
A question?
Is the future, we're doing a certain amount of work in the lab testing space with genetics and blood and so on. Is a future iteration of this to consider that, Ancestry.com and so on?
Absolutely. So we are actually partnering right now in conversations with Family Search, and we'll probably be part of their upcoming conference. And of course, Family Search is very similar to Ancestry, and they're all friends in that space. And absolutely, we've had several of our operational partners have success by doing DNA tests of the youth that they serve. There are some legalities there with minors, but with young adults, it's quite doable. There's a young woman in Ohio who now is connected with her biological family. Nice. With her new baby on the way. She aged out of foster care. And because she was from a dissolved adoption, they had no records of her biological family. A DNA swab, and a week later, she had biological family in her apartment, standing by, ready to help, and said, "We never knew. We never knew you needed help."
How do you deal with
Great.
HIPAA issues and privacy issues?
So our software is HIPAA compliant, but we also tell our users there's no need to put any HIPAA sensitive data in it. If you choose to, it's protected. We've made it HIPAA compliant, but it's also placed on Google Cloud Platform, which the federal government rates at FedRAMP level high. National Institutes of Health uses Google Cloud Platform, a number of states do. So we feel confident in that security. We also have built security into this from the very beginning, because several of our tech advisors, as well as our CTO, have built their career reputations on cybersecurity. And so that was heavily influenced how we built this. Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
Got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, so
Do
one.
you, on every pro bono board I've served, I always look for an opportunity for revenue generation rather than donation.
Sure.
So have you thought about revenue generation using this platform? I mean, you could easily go and compete with these people, find somebody or get their court
Right.
records and driving.
Right, I guess, yeah.
You could do that and
Mhm.
charge them 50% of what they charge. And
Yeah.
not do it yourself. Give it to
Yeah.
somebody who wants that enterprise, and you have a relationship with them.
So our search software is just not what you're looking at the map there, but just the part that searches the internet and feeds that data. That's just a front end integration on an existing search software. So we pay a small fee and they give us a discount rate. And I'd love to talk to you more about your ideas if you're willing afterwards. But right now we found that because this space is not a direct to customer, right? So they're the ultimate customer, and they have these layers of government bureaucracy between them and success. And one of the big obstacles that we found early on was contracting. The social welfare, the child welfare space, as a bureaucracy, county and state run, does not buy goods and services efficiently. So they're very happy to not do any of this.
Right. So to put another way, there's lots of data vendors in this space, and what they're doing is they're aggregating the data. So they're not really doing anything original outside of the front end, right? Because they're going out to multiple sources and they're grabbing them. But the problem of commercialization of this is that there's bureaucracy around every aspect of foster care, and you have to get approval to make this thing happen. So I was hoping we could get to the discussion of the operations.
So why don't
and
we
your
can skip
need
the next
for-
one, since I gave a case example, but I'm happy to talk about Abby's story with anyone. This was just a huge success from a user that we had. But why don't we, and I can go quickly through this. So Abby's a case example that our user, Sue, recently shared with us. She was literally a teenager heading into a downward spiral, depression and withdrawal. Her caseworker, Sue, got a hold of our software, got Abby's case, was commonly using Sue was using our software for all her cases. Within minutes, she found 7 relatives of Abby. Abby had been in foster care for years, had been in dozens of homes, and no one had ever really searched for her relatives. Her grandfather was one of those 7. He was the family organizer, family director. They'd been trying to figure out what happened to Abby for the whole time she'd been in foster care, but no one had reached out. Grandfather organized a family meeting. Abby connected with an adult cousin like almost instantly at that meeting. And within weeks, she's moving into that cousin's home. And the social worker told us she had never seen such a turnaround in a kid so fast. She went from spiraling downward in depression to being outgoing and excited kid. So you can imagine the difference that makes in the adult that we're going to see in a couple years from Abby, and whether she's going to be out there becoming a contributor to society or whether she's not.
And what was the proximity of this family to her? Were they nearby?
Yeah, they're nearby. They're almost always in the greater metropolitan area or the greater general rural area of where they are. They rarely have to look very far for this family. So there's a quick example to really kind of make that real. We've found that a lot of states, a lot of people want to do this. So I said states and counties are often fine not doing it, but that's not true for social workers. And we're also finding that a lot of states and counties, when they realize it's actually doable, they want to do it. So all the light blue are places where we have users, a various number of users in those states. The gray is where we have yet to have users. So we're in 44 states. 6 of those states plus LA County has taken a state or county level action of official approval of what we're doing. Various ones. A couple have given us money at the state level. We have an MOU with Michigan. They're doing a pilot. Washington State and Oregon have done formal state level reviews of our software. And Washington in particular said in the review that was the most beautiful piece of software they have ever reviewed. So that was correct.
So the product is readily available for download by social workers.
That's correct.
There's no cost, but there's a cost of training, which is expensive. They have some states that support it, but every state they contract with or locality they contract with limits the expenditures of the money only for that state. So even though they're funded by
Ohio and Mississippi.
They can't use the Ohio money to work in California.
Right.
And California has the largest number of foster kids in the country.
California has the largest number of foster kids in the country. LA County in particular has about 40,000 just in LA County.
Wow.
So we're doing.
I'm sorry, the estimated $500,000 for a child in foster care, who pays that, state or the federal government?
So a mix. That's a general assessment of taxpayer costs. So it depends on, if they end up in a federal prison, then the federal government would be bearing that cost. If they end up in a state homeless shelter, then the state would be bearing that.
And just to be clear in my own mind, you're doing both finding relatives to be foster parents, and do you find completely separate strangers to be?
Sure. So there will always be a need for really good foster parents who weren't previously known to a particular foster child. And that's fine. They can learn to know them and love them, and that's great. But a child ultimately needs a permanent family for life. And a foster family, if they don't choose to move past being a foster family, which is fine, they are not going to be that child's parents when that child is now 35 or walking down the aisle.
Right.
So they may stay in their life, and that's wonderful. But it's important for the human mind to have people they
So
belong
there
to.
should be actually an official or at least a de facto adoption.
Right, a permanent, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Only concentrating on children who are in their late teens or around 18, or
So it can,
places, et cetera?
yeah, originally that was a conceptual focus. It can be used by whoever our operational partners are serving. So there's a need, especially for teens who are likely to age out, to be connected to family as quickly as possible. It can even be used, some programs are serving youth who have aged out. So they have bridges programs if they're getting ready to age out. Those all work. And in fact, there's actually a use in the homeless center community where we're just starting to talk to them around using it for adults of any age to reconnect them to the people that they get disrupted.
Can we talk about operations?
Yeah. So this is where I gave my earlier kind of full disclosure. This return on investment is being used not in the traditional sense, but in the sense of return of taxpayer dollars. And you can see there's some of the numbers that we've talked about. We believe that with a 10-year, $26 million investment in the work we're doing, that we can make an incredible improvement in this space. Child welfare has not seen innovation or creative ideas implemented since it was really codified in the middle of the last century. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. It's a bureaucratic function, and bureaucracies don't really evolve and be creative in any kind of scale. So there's a handful of things that you see listed there, and I can talk about each of those briefly in the next page, that we think can make an incredible difference beyond what we're already doing.
So let me just stop right here. So I'm working with Art Bilger. He's raising hundreds of millions of dollars for his not-for-profit. And I was on the phone with Jessica, and I said, so Jessica, it sounds really great. How much money are you guys looking to raise? She says, 26 million. I said, that sounds really great. $26 million a year. That's really fantastic. You can operate at that expense. She said, no. We operate at an expense of $2.6 million a year. That's their operating cost. And when you extrapolate that over 400,000 kids, it's around $10 a kid, of all the foster kids in the country, which is a nothing. And so the break even becomes something where if you place 10 to 20 kids, you're kind of breaking even on social costs, right? I mean, that's just unbelievable. 10 to 20 kids out of 400,000 when they claim 2,000 youth annually, right?
Do you operate virtually and do you have a locale?
We are almost completely virtual. So we do, several of us happen to be located in the Northern Virginia area, but we have folks in California and Washington State, and people just, one of the ways that we spend as little as possible on anything that's not crucial to our mission is that we just operate virtually out of home offices and we meet as needed.
So again, so again, we have this executive committee of Art Bilger. It's probably like 35 to, actually they've added 5 family offices from this group to it. But about 35 to 40 people on it, and they're expert at helping raise money for a working nation. But I figured that this group could also bring in a couple other people who would just be fantastic in helping these guys raise some of this, $26 million they're looking to raise, because the bang for the buck is phenomenal from a social cost point of view. So let's go to the next slide.
Sure. So this is just a little more detail on that 10-year investment detail. I'll just highlight a couple things. I know we're getting tight on time, but one of the things that's crucial to what we do not serve children directly. Our partner operators do. We provide them this innovative software so that they can do what they do and do it quickly. So we try to find the most efficient and effective partners, and we want to really support them. But the way that we move the needle over the 10 years is we get into the schools of social work and we change how social workers are trained so that they learn that this is how they should be doing business and that they can do business. So if you take a young kid and you send them to school and they've grown up with this in their hand, and then they go out to their first job and they're asked to work like this, they're like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. But if they come out of social work, school of social work, knowing, no, I can, because we have an app version, of course, I can do all this on my phone. You guys are crazy. And I know how to use it, and I will now train all of you. We have some of our partner organizations where the 26-year-old is training the whole office. We had an organization in Ohio that did that. The 26-year-old was running training for all of her 50-year-old colleagues. And they are getting on board and doing this. And then the AI piece is a lot of fun, of course. There's a lot of ideas there and some connections that we're working on where this can be even more automated and dig even deeper. But I will touch on just the DNA testing on the top right section there, since you asked, Pete. For sure, we think that DNA can be taken further. There can be a lot more that can be done with that, and we have a lot of ideas around that. So, and then, so what we need, obviously, we're trying to raise funding because bureaucracy can do things, some things, but they have a real difficult time being creative and innovative. Ohio's money needs to be spent in Ohio. It's hard to be innovative around DNA testing and AI with bureaucracy's money.
Have you presented
And you've raised money already in
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the money you raised is about 10 million from Ohio and Mississippi.
So we've raised 6 million from
6
Ohio and Mississippi. We've raised another about million or so from other family foundations.
Family offices.
From family foundations generally, the non-government money is individuals and family foundations. And
What about the large?
So they have 6 million from this government and 1 million from foundations.
The
So the 6 million is untouchable.
state government.
State government.
State government.
So what about the large foundation, the Ford, the Carnegie,
So we would love introductions to those. That's the other thing, as I was saying.
You can do that.
We have found, so we've had some conversations at lower levels with some, not those particular ones, but we have found that it's really crucial to be introduced with a warm introduction to the right person. Otherwise, you just on fringes.
So it's just another, if you want to join the executive committee, we can, get those introductions. I have several of them myself, but I thought that as a group project, it's really something that we could work on, knowing that already we have a half a dozen people who've joined the Working Nation Executive Committee. This is another way to work together, get to know each other, and also, exploit some of our contacts that we have. We can really make a difference on making something this simple happen, which really is a cost of about $10 a kid in foster care. So,
So, and then of course, any state and local, federal connections as well. So that's it. Please reach out to us. Say again?
what's your corporate structure?
We're a 501c3. Yep. Fully tax deductible.
Are you on the board, Marty?
I'm just helping put together the executive committee, and I welcome everybody to join who has substantial contacts. I'm trying to explain. Let's face it, I have 70,000 LinkedIn contacts in a database of 15 million people. So I'm going out to a lot of people to get them to become part of this. I think it's a great endeavor. I don't see it as being something which is going to exhaust somebody's spare time. And I don't see it as being a big raise either, because it's $2.6 million a year to operate, which is nothing in this group, considering, you know, what we've done in the past, you know. If you're out there listening on Zoom as well, and you want to participate, just, you know, send me a text message and we'll include you in discussions. But we're looking forward to it. Jen will be traveling or speaking at our events in San Francisco and Miami as well, and maybe in Texas as well. And we just think it's a great opportunity to do something that's good, that's not going to crush your time, your free time. And it's not a kind of raise that's like a lifetime of raising like Eric Singer does. It's really kind of raise that is something where you reach out to friends, you let them know that this is not a big raise at all, and that the social payback is fantastic, right? Because you are placing people whose, you know, lives are dead ends back with family, enabling them. There's also another platform aspect to this, which I think Jen might have hinted at in the past that they're using in California, but if anybody knows, California and New York, LA and New York both have programs to relocate homeless people, where if they can find the family, they pay them $5,000 to move. It's just a program that's been around for probably 5 years. And there's an application of this in the real estate market where, you know, you have people who own lots of real estate in Los Angeles or New York, and homeless people really drive down real estate values. So there's some self-interest involved as well. So I think there's a usage of this platform as well in that area. So I'm not sure, are you working with LA on some of this, or?
Yes, we are in conversations with LA, and LA being LA, it just takes a while, but
right. So the issue is, you know, bureaucracy. You know, we've talked to Bradley Tusk in the past and other people along those lines who are, you know, kind of experts on working away through bureaucracy, but it's never easy and it's never inexpensive. So this is just a good way to kind of Trojan horses technology in to people that can use it.
Will you post this for us? The presentation?
Oh yeah. I've already released it, but I'll release it again. It'll go out with the emails, the follow-up emails.